It's easier, someone once said, to imagine the end of the world than it is the end of capitalism.
But it's clear that where we can make systems of this complexity, cultural systems, economic systems, machines of this complexity, surely we could make a world that could first meet those needs I described that everyone should have, and then perhaps meet needs that people have only dreamed of, like the need for some autonomy and freedom. The need for that little space up there, the I part, to expand a little bit. Just a little. Just a little. Just a little.
The socialism that could engage with the yearnings and dreamings
in Miles Davis music.
An aesthetic dimension.
Radically incompatible with everyday life under capitalism.
Okay, hey there, hi, it's Mike of the Acid Left here with my guest Matthew Donovan. Matthew is the co-founder of the LA research, education and activist group, The Future Left, and a sociology undergraduate currently at Columbia University in New York. His work has been covered in the New York Times, Washington Post and LA Weekly. And he's also led international reading and working activist groups and has just this massive history of activist organization, including organizing educational events. The Future Left has created a documentary focusing on the corruption of LA police unions, and I mean, it's just so much he's done, so I won't go on and on, but he's just brilliant and has a great online presence as well. But he interests me more because he has this history of organization. So I brought Matt here to talk about solidarity and the left and activist tactics and what we do with the online left and electoral politics. So really, like, how do we just like weaponize this stuff? Maybe that's not the best term, but how do we make everything more incisive? How do we move people away from a reliance on electoral politics and increasing reliance on online forms of dialogue and activism? So Matt, how are you doing?
I'm good. I'm enjoying my first winter in New York and my first semester back at school. So
okay, great.
Yeah.
So you went back after taking a break for a while. Was that mainly because of your activism?
Yeah, I mean, the real world stuff always seems to seem more important than, going to school and getting a credential. But I also went to an online school studying theory, and it just felt like I hit a ceiling personally. So now I'm kind of pursuing things in a completely different way, and I'm really happy to be here. But I had to move away from from LA, and that's where a lot of our educational and organizing work was in LA. So I'm starting afresh here, and but I'm happy to be here and happy to talk about solidarity with you. So do you want to jump right in?
I mean, there's a lot to cover. I mean, I was thinking just maybe of asking you whilst we're here about the US election campaign in 2020. Maybe you were also involved in 2016. I'm not sure, but if you could just tell us about your experience with Sanders, what you were doing, and of course what might be next for Sanders and the movement, because really he fronted a movement, and obviously the movement kind of coalesced around his name. If he's not there anymore, although we hope he carries on forever, but, if he's not running again, how is that movement going to continue?
Yeah, it seems like Bernie and Biden won't be an option in the next election. So the latest rumors, I think sometimes these rumors are just tests from the Democratic Party to see how people respond. But the latest was that Buttigieg and Kamala Harris would be running together. on a single ticket to represent the moderate wing of the Democratic Party. I'm not really sure about what the progressive options are. Of course, AOC will be old enough for the first time to run. Her popularity has shifted slightly. She might be less popular among progressives, but she is starting to have more popularity among people who would have identified with Elizabeth Warren, because she's kind of in that middle ground between moderates and progressives, with the way she's made concessions with moderates during her residency in Congress. So yeah, so maybe we would see Elizabeth Warren and AOC running together. Maybe we'd see some younger Congress or senators running together. I'm not sure, but I'm guessing that it's mostly going to be a lot. We're going to see a lot more women running, and we're going to see a lot more people of color than before. I know that those are obvious options. Yeah, but other than that, I think it's hard to say. On the right, we'll probably see DeSantis running, who, you know, is getting popularity among people who, you know, might like Trump, but might like his kind of, you know, pro-worker nationalist approaches, with, you know, the ways he's boosted teachers' unions in Florida. So yeah, so it's hard to say. I personally haven't been following. I was involved with the Sanders campaign, and spent a lot of my time in 2020 working with him, and I'm sad that he's going to go. But it seems like progressives now have a lot more runway because he existed, and we're just going to have to grow from here. So.
Okay, I mean, so what was that like? I mean, obviously I'm English, or obviously I'm not American, but just for the record, I'm English. I actually live in Finland, but in any case, I haven't ever been to the States. I have followed US politics. The Sanders movement is a big thing that many other movements have been modeled on. And you know, aside from that, America's a very powerful country, so people look to America to some degree. And there's no doubt that the landscape has been reshaped in the last few years by Sanders and Corbyn, alongside, you know, other obviously very important movements in other countries. I mean, I tend to be very Anglo-American, Anglo-centric, unfortunately. But I mean, what was it like being there? Did it feel like a big thing? How were you involved organizationally, and what did you learn from that experience?
My involvement in 2016 was pretty limited. I volunteered pretty sporadically, but was very involved in other ways. And 2020, I kind of put the gas to the. I kind of was completely involved as much as I could be. I ended up working for him. And yeah, I don't know. I think in 2020, there was a groundswell of support that kind of expected to be larger than 2016. And the organizational strength, like the way that the organizing of the Sanders campaign actually existed, was a lot stronger. It seemed more legitimate, and it really seemed like we were going to win when we were in Vegas. And there was really no competitors at the time, right before all the Democrats, joined together, all the moderates joined together. And it really felt revolutionary. And I know that's really naive to say now, but it felt, it actually felt for the first time like there, a new world was possible, even if the new world just means higher wages and healthcare and basic things, or things that maybe, Sanders couldn't have even achieved, but running on such a platform wasn't possible before, and is now possible. But the materialist and the realist in me has always knew that, that progressives have a long way to go. And there's a really good winning rate of DSA candidates in the midterms before the elections. But we still have to realize that, Bernie Sanders ran in 2016, ignited this new movement that was transferred to 2018. And that history moves slowly. That means that progressive movements really influencing mainstream and local politics across the United States is going to take a really long time. And it's going to be a continual process. And I think that if we're realistic like this, it'll help us not, feel hopeless when we don't sweep in the midterms, coming up next year. And it's going to be a slow battle, I think, for gaining more and more support. We hear a lot of, after the 2020 election, you heard people like Matt Christmas from like Chapo Trap House, who completely kind of like melted down and became kind of like a nihilist about American politics. And I just felt like that whole situation was not put in perspective.
Is that where the grill pilling came in?
That's grill pilling. Yeah, that's grill pilling. Yeah, that's
so basically for the public who might not know, isn't that where Matt Kirstman of this famous podcast, he basically did this kind of monologue saying that he was fed up, he was really disappointed in the way that we ended up. Was it already when the election had been run, so he knew we ended up with Biden in power? And he said he felt like giving up, and the only thing he could think of doing was just grilling, as in barbecuing, and that there should be a new movement around just like having a barbecues, getting together. You can maybe have people from different kind of political backgrounds getting together and just like maybe reassessing from that point of view. But I think the point was to be kind of apolitical for a while. What do you make? What do you make of that?
Well, that's. Being apolitical.
Your suggestion was just now was that it was nihilistic. So I suppose that that's kind of your take on it. But when you say nihilistic, do you see grill pilling as in line with what we call, is it black pilling, like nihilist shit posting?
Oh, black pilling, yeah. Oh, the reason that we get so upset, is because we don't manage our expectations in the beginning, right? We knew that we were going up against a large historical well-funded machine, and that they have, a lot of power and institutional support on their side. We knew that, so I think we just have to manage our expectations continually.
Yeah, I think the thing
is, it's easy to get.
Yeah, go on.
Oh, I think it's just easy to really get swept up in the feeling that because you're devoted to something that you're likely going to win. The grill pilling thing makes sense. It's valid. It's an okay position to take. I feel apolitical at times too. I'm not always, invested when life, gets the best of me as well.
I think it's kind of a non-position, but on the other hand, I don't know. I've certainly been to some barbecues. Finland is big on barbecues. They have like public barbecues set up. Obviously this probably exists in many countries, but they have really a lot of kind of these cast iron, like almost like bowls in which you can like put your charcoal and grill. And it's a pastime that people really embrace, particularly because we have the long summer. Well, I won't say long summer. We have summers with very long days, so we have like 6 months of darkness and 6 months of light. And when it gets light, people start their barbecues. And I noticed that when people barbecue, they tend to all get along. I don't know if it's a calming influence of the fire, or that people don't tend to like want to start fights around the fire. Maybe, I don't know. But the thing is, the politics here is very oriented around barbecues as well. That when they do their campaigning, they tend to get the grills out. So all the different parties have their own grill setups. I'm with a party called Vasamisto, which is it translates as the Left Alliance, and it's slightly left of the centre left. It was the Communist Party, but by now it really is nothing like communist. But it's left of it's probably Bernie-esque, like Bernie-esque and Corbyn-esque. And yeah, I mean, we have like a whole barbecue like professional thing that comes in a trailer that we get out, but the things we do with it are pretty lame. Like we have these barbecue things, but they're kind of soft. Like there's nothing around it. It's just we give out some sausages and that's it. I mean, I think there's much more potential there. It doesn't have to be a barbecue, but that's a good place around which people can coalesce. I just wonder if there
totally.
should be more to there should be more to the grill pilling. I mean, you can forget the forget the grill.
Grill pilling.
Go on.
But the grill pilling thing is like, I don't know about Matt Crispin, but the grill pilling thing is typically considered to be kind of like a right trad kind of reference, right? Where it's like you're referencing this old 50s culture of grilling. It's not just like you've given up on everything and you're in Hawaiian t-shirts. It's like it is also referencing kind of like this you've given up on everything and now you're maybe going to the right. I think Crispin probably just meant like he's just like become nihilistic probably, but it is supposed to be kind of like a trad thing as well. Of course, when leftists meme about it, it's supposed to be, it has a number of different meanings, but it does originate in like this trad positioning, I would say.
I mean, I think one thing I noticed is that the right wing here have better grills. When they do their grills, when it comes to campaigning and they get their grills out and their tents and whatnot, it looks like they're having more fun and it's all a bit more dirty, a bit more kind of how a grill should be. Whereas the left party, when we grill, there's no passion there really. I mean, that's what makes me think there's potential for this grill pilling in Finland, but we just have to do it better. And then I just got to thinking about the acid left, obviously, because this platform we're talking on now is called the acid left, and because it's something I talk about a bit, acid communism coming from Mark Fisher. Right. I don't think we probably want to get into Mark Fisher too much. I did remember I heard you talking on Insta recently. You were talking to a friend of yours, and she or they were saying that there's just so much Fisher around. Everyone's talking about Fisher, and she was getting a bit sick of it. Obviously, I've just published a book partly on Fisher, which I won't go into. But you do get that feeling sometimes that his name is mentioned just so much. It's a bit of a bubble around Fisher right now, even though his work is brilliant. But he did come up with this idea called acid communism, which is something I talk about a bit. So, what would be an acid communist grill pilling? I mean, I don't really want you to answer it, but it's worth just thinking about. We could have the whole grill pilling thing around a countercultural movement. So you could kind of get the rednecks coming, but you could also have some very different people coming, and we could all talk together and grill, and people can drop acid if they want, or they can drink herbal tea or whatever they want to do.
Right.
But I think the thing is with the acid communist notion, the idea that we need to build a new counterculture, it's going to need several countercultures or several cultures, because you're not going to convince everyone to get around a 60s style counterculture.
Yeah. I mean, the reason I think that memeing is fun is because it's good to take a position that isn't of this kind of like identitarian approach or this ideological approach, like making a meme about I was at the student workers protests yesterday and at Columbia University, and I was making a meme during it and kind of making memes that were like making fun of the student workers, but in a way that like made people want to know more about the student workers, so like taking a position where it's like, we don't have to like kind of like worship these ideologies. We don't have to worship people doing the work. We don't have to worship meme pages or anything. We can make fun of everyone, right? We don't have to take everything so serious. And I don't know, I think there's a lot of possibility and like accepting the differences that can come up and these kind of like playful critiques. I think a lot of like when we were talking about solidarity, a lot of the inability to create solidarity is the inability to accept differences, and then to siphon off into these enclaves of culture and identities, of this is my political identity or ideology. And yeah, I think that part of the issue, which acid communism brings up, is this idea that we need to kind of reimagine culture. We need to reimagine life. We need to reimagine all of these things, which is kind of like how Butler talked about gender, and like how kind of Deleuze used philosophy. And but I think that and I think that I think one of the ways to do that would be to also bring in artificial intelligence. And this is kind of talked about in a number of books that have come out, especially one from Kenrick McDowell. And I think that there's multiple approaches. I think that maybe using psychedelics is one approach. I think that maybe also starting to open up more possibilities for community. There's often feuds online, and I often will be friends with both people online. Like there's two different meme pages, and I don't take a side, and if it gets personal, I don't want to get involved, of course, which it ended up being. But I think that it's really important to be able to kind of be in everyone's corner sometimes, like, and this relates to realistic movements too, like the WTO, right? So the world, when there's the anti-WTO protests, there was this new imagining of communities that existed, in different cultures, because it was the first time, or one of the first times, that world protests were having to reimagine kind of a new left across borders, across ideologies. And we have people like, Saul Alinsky, that always said things like focus on policy, not ideology, right? And so that's a good way of kind of leaning into that, right? But the other thing about that is that to get past ideology, we have to accept difference in ideologies, difference in identities. And I think that that's really hard right now. I think it's almost literally impossible for some groups to get past how their identities and ideologies create enclaves. And there's good reason for that, but it doesn't create a unified movement. And so some people have called this, counter hegemony, but as a unified movement against the main hegemonic movement. But then there's also a meta counter hegemony, right, where large groups of people from large swaths of backgrounds, identities, ideologies pair together to create new ways of creating community. And what we see now is, because we can't tolerate difference, we can't have ideas of like community. We can't have solidarity. We have feuds. We have blue check marks. This type of thing instead.
Yeah.
What is your feeling on
that? That's a number of interesting points. I mean, I think that part of the problem is that the populist right, and I think some extremist kind of aspects of the populist right that lean more towards the far right as well, that they also think they're countering hegemony effectively, but they're not using the same vocabulary. But we can't really form alliances with these people because aesthetically they're too, horrible for us. And of course, a lot of their beliefs, are contrary to ours. But there's probably a broad part of the Trump movement and even QAnon who are kind of along for the ride, who basically, they see a problem of hierarchy effectively, of the world being run by very few people for their benefit, and they exploit everyone else, for profit. This is all kind of seen by QAnon and by Trump supporters, but then they end up saying things like it's all run by a democratic cabal of, blood drinking Satanists or whatever. and that makes it hard to form alliances, obviously. But yeah, I think partly
I was more talking about just people on the left. It's
on the
difficult.
left,
Yeah, on the left, it's difficult because we love enclaves, right? We love
well, yeah. I mean, I
cities love
suppose, yeah.
enclaves.
I think I understood. Yeah, I did understand that. I mean, I guess
It's like
I
the
feel like it feels like
hierarchies.
I'm going off on a tangent, but I suppose
That's okay.
I'm saying that even the ones that are like extremely removed from us, effectively have at base some of the same impulses, but somehow they're not joining up the dots in the same ways that we are. I mean, that goes for even the far right. So the left, I mean, it's even more the case that people on the left, we end up arguing very easily, but effectively we're motivated by many of the same things. And I think that whether it be a leftist or a rightist, whether it be a leftist you don't agree with or a rightist, that we're so easily divided by the online space just because of the way it presents itself. So one proceeds through the online space by making kind of very quick, powerful statements, and that basically means constantly disagreeing, or at least setting yourself up to be disagreed with. Yeah, I mean, it's very atomizing, and I don't know how we get around that really. And you talk about the blue ticks. This is one of the problems. People they assume power in a new way online, and then they use that power. They make it be felt very much. Yeah, it's very troubling.
Yeah, I mean, there's different. I mean, there's different hierarchies that exist. There's like the academic. There's the academic left, of course, who take roles and either they take roles in NGOs or they take roles on Twitter, whatever form of power. But these things have always been there, people like Lefebvre, Debord, Rancière, have been talking about this for a really long time, and then more recently, we have like Thomas Frank and Catherine Liu talking about these ideas of the labor aristocracy, the labor aristocrats, or the professional managerial class, and there's kind of like a siphoning of power that could be used towards larger political movements that are put into careerist aspirations often. So you get people who get consulting work with for instance like BP, and people that could be working for the left who are now shooting down the Green New Deal. And that's that's a really crude example. But this is kind of, this is what we've been up against for a really long time, I think since the 1970s, when, the Democratic Party was clearly no longer tied to the working class at all. This is kind of the history that Thomas Frank covers. So now we have like a new kind of class of the aristocrats that are a lot more subtle, people online. And then we have, there's different levels to this, like if people want, like people, like we have people like in the podcasting world and people and the meme world, who are effectively just online to troll AOC and create kind of like aesthetic and epistemological debates, and they're not effectively going to influence anyone but the people in their enclaves, And it's interesting because if you look at cities have enclaves too, which are like PMCs create enclaves, right? They create people, like they create, instead of being a part of a larger movement, they're part of more of like a narcissistic enclave where Like in cities, you have, certain neighborhoods, enclaves where, they weren't redlined, they had lots of capital support. And cities are also where the largest amounts of, inequality exist, people that are supposedly blue, democratic and against inequality. So I don't know, I think we have to think about our cognitive dissonance all the time. It's really hard to be like, okay, I know that, as somebody that's going to Columbia, that I'm in an inequality center myself. I know that I'm in a city. I know that I'm in this really enclaved online platform, and it's just something I've been thinking about, is the ways that the people that are so hyper focused on the left are the people that are focused on it in an aesthetic way as opposed to a political way. Like the aesthetic has replaced the political.
Yeah, I mean, when you said PMC, you mean back then you meant professional managerial class. Just for any reader who didn't get that, I think that's what the acronym means. So yeah, I mean, there is this problem. I mean, there is this issue of academics really using academia as a means of not doing anything in an activist sense, or rather using the whole kind of talk around activism or around the left as a means of building a career and seeming a little bit edgy. But the fact they're academics means they don't really have to actually do anything. They just get to talk about it, and that's kind of a preventative move. It stops things from happening because you're just like endlessly arguing over Marx or something. I mean, Karl Marx, not like Marx like grades. And I mean, yeah, I mean, I think that the podcasting fraternity, I mean, that is doing a similar thing. I mean, you get people who are academics and people who aren't actually academics. I mean, it does do one thing, is it allows lots of people to kind of talk like academics who didn't ever get a post in a university, and that's good. It opens things up in a way, but it means that
totally.
you just have like but those people, then kind of mimicking what academics do, but in a different way, and maybe they're speaking to bigger audiences, but they're still not being active, many of them. But this is a difficult one because, of course, I don't know how many podcasters are involved in political parties in an organizing capacity. I'm involved locally in a left party. I guess many other people are. I mean, I'm not sure what they're doing. We can't assume they're not doing anything. But I don't get the feeling that many of them are really saying to their listeners, get out and join your local, whatever it can. It doesn't have, you don't have to say what it is, but
no, because that's like aesthetically over determined, or like it's like overdone. It's like it's kind of, because they're working at a cultural level, so the political is too on the ground, too boring.
But if they are like obviously political podcast, for example, would you say it's still the same, that there's something a bit vulgar for them in actually saying go out and help locally?
Well, I mean, I understand the, I understand the urge, or I understand the issue with, coming from the opposite end, where it's like activists are always posting infographics, and often these infographics are kind of, based on bad data, or like maybe they're good, or activists are just posting like kind of like the same aesthetic content all the time. And we just have been seeing these graphics. We're kind of like at the end of the road of this era, it seems like, of this kind of like activistization of daily life and social media. It seems like people are a little burnt out on it. So that's why I think people are reacting to it, and that's why
maybe, yeah.
I think that there's some legitimacy to it, but I think that if you drink the Kool-Aid too much, you can completely forget, that there's still people on the street that are, just trying not to get policed. Like in LA, like it's illegal to be homeless. It's illegal to feed the homeless in some parts of LA. People don't know that the Olympics coming to LA are going to over police the whole city and going to create more inequality and these types of things, right? So if everything is a joke, which I think things should be funnier, I think we should accept that people are making fun of us all the time, because people, everyone is in the same room now. Like in the 90s, whatever room you were in that room, and everyone was talking about what was happening in that room. Now we're all in the same room, and we have to start to build a little bit more tolerance for indifference. And I think that I think that the traditional academic left, the traditional activist left doesn't really have a good sense of humor. And I think that, the critique of canceling is not necessarily that they think that like rapists are good. It's more that like they don't, that like these activist pages will turn comments off, will block anyone that disagrees with them, or will just basically call anyone that disagrees with them a liberal. Like, there's so many issues that everyone has their issues. And I like being an interlocutor between, the activist space and kind of like the parapolitical space of theory and memes and podcasting. I like being in that cultural space, I like being in the activist space too. I like being in between, I think that it's a really good way of influencing politics, so that things don't get too boring, for everyday people. And then maybe like you were talking about the right earlier, like, by taking the strategy of culture, maybe we can get some people from the right to join us, like after the Zizek and Peterson debate,
Yeah, I mean, we probably need to. If you look at the numbers, it just seems so very hard to do that. I don't know, people get hung up on, like, as you say, aesthetics, and then it's very difficult to get them to come over to your side. I mean, I know a couple of Trump supporters, not many. I mean, really, like 2 people that I know are right wing. I mean, possibly maybe there's other people who I don't talk about politics to, but they're reasonable people, but they just have, like, the whole framework is somehow upside down and you can't get through to them. And that's a problem we really face. But going back to podcasters, I mean, I think you let them off the hook a bit, because you're saying, look, maybe they don't want to get involved in that whole kind of very directly political posting of infographics and this kind of very instrumental stuff, that's kind of anyhow maybe aesthetically a bit dull, but in addition to that, is kind of, it's too much for people, maybe because people have been in this very kind of confrontational space for a few years now, and maybe people want to kind of shut off and joke around a bit more about politics, and that's what we do on podcasts often, or we kind of dress it up in this academic speak, and that's kind of entertaining for some people as well. Maybe they're doing that, but I see something a bit like what's happening in the art world, and it's a bit more sinister, and that is that people go to art spaces and they look at exhibitions about migrants, for example. In Europe, you have many shows about migrants, particularly the last few years, when it came about that many people were dying trying to cross from Africa to Italy, for example, over the Mediterranean. And I was living in Italy at that point, and there seemed to be a real guilt, because you were getting obviously these photos of things like babies who had been found on beaches, or young children who had washed up dead, and that was it was very shocking to see that. And so you get people doing these shows trying to process this, and you get people going to the exhibitions, and they're mostly middle class people, and they deal with the issue of immigration, or the issue of poverty generally, or the issue of warfare. But they're looking at it through a microscope or a telescope. They're not really dealing with it face to face. And in Italy, there are migrants living on the streets, particularly in Rome, where I was living. There were so many, because actually the thing is, the mafia have got contracts for housing migrants, because the mafia have gone into, getting big government contracts for things, and they hadn't looked after the migrants properly. So you had many on the streets, and others who were undocumented,
right?
Living on the street. So they were very present. But people, they would run from a migrant in the street who was asking for money, or at least, you know, they would like be very short with them, and they wouldn't want to speak with them. But then they would go in a gallery and look at images of migrants, and it's like almost by doing that you're able to look at it, but from a distance. That's part of the effect of art, of political art, unfortunately. So I think, you know, podcasting, academia have sometimes similar roles, that we're talking about left politics a lot, but who wants to go and speak to the workers? And, you know, I say that obviously I freelance and I do work in universities, and I've worked like in supermarkets and all sorts when I was younger, like many of us do. You know, maybe I shouldn't have to say that, but okay, you know, I work, but still, you know, I'm still going to say who's going to go and speak to the workers, because when I say workers, I mean like, you know, the people stacking shelves or working in factories.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, we should talk about those things. We should talk about our experiences. I think that those things are really important. And we shouldn't
experiences is one thing, but I don't want to make too much of the fact that I did work like in pretty shitty environments for years. It's not so much I want to bring that up, but I mean, like, who amongst us is actually going to go and speak with nurses and you know, other like key workers? I mean, I think most
going to speak to the nurses? Yeah.
Most podcasters are terrified. Most podcasters, they don't want to speak to anyone, or not most, but I think there's some leaning more towards academia. But
yeah. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm not an expert on podcasters. I just know like the most popular ones, and those are the people I'm talking about, right? But I mean, it just goes back to this idea that if we watch, you know, Mr. Robot, or if we watch a documentary on rebellion of some kind, you know, it's like, if we watch a documentary, for instance, on the workers organizing in Immokalee Valley, where the workers were getting paid like nothing, basically, to farm most of the nation's vegetables, basically slavery happening in the United States, you know, these types of things. There's like this benefit by vicariously living through the documentary, that we, you know, get that sense that we were a part of that experience, because our brain, I mean, you know, there's just like, there's things that being human, you know, that there's things that as being a human, we would rather do the low calorie version of hard things, right? The low calorie version of this is like, if we watch the documentary, we don't have to go support those workers. We don't have to donate to them or whatever. But also, I think it's really important to have like a good theory of change and of a movement. And I think that it's not, what I'm saying, I guess, to kind of qualify it, is just that I know that we have to have all types of people working within like what we call a movement, and that teachers are part of them, and organizers are part of them, and agitators and protesters are part of them. Like people that are filming the cops, for instance, right, and aggravating the cops on a daily basis. And then we need people like, say, like the LA Tenants Union, who are actually organizing people and, you know, their dwellings to have, I don't know how many different, you know, organizations there are actually in LA. I think it was like around 80 to 100 or something like that. And so you have like this huge, massive organization that is actually organized tons of tiny, different tenants unions within the larger tenants union. And then you have this huge group that has all of this power, you know. But then you also need teachers. You need people that are then, you know, going into legislative chambers, like that are lobbying on behalf of activists. And then you need legislators that will actually do all of these things. It's like, you know, a lot of times the problem is that we get really myopic and think that because, you know, we're always kind of like posturing with somebody that is not doing enough, you know, and no one's ever doing enough. And, you know, at a certain point, there are people that I do question, you know, even having this holistic view of what changes. You know, there's people where it's like, you know, you're like, some of the memers remind me of like RevCom, which are like the cheesiest communist, like RevCom meaning revolutionary communism, the group also known as, used to be called Communist Party USA, I believe was their old name. You might know them, Mike. I'm not sure if you have those in Finland or Italy or UK, but so these people were like the cheesiest people, and all they would do is go online, and then they would just like criticize AOC, and they'd criticize like Greta Thunberg, and they'd criticize Bernie Sanders, and basically they'd criticize like everyone that was doing anything electoral, right? Because they thought the whole electoral system.
You mean like tankies, basically?
Yeah, they're tanky. I think they're. I don't know if they're tankies actually. I assume they're tankies, but yeah, people like that. And it's like, they're. I mean, there's part of like the meme world where it's like, yeah, this is definitely not going. This is completely aesthetic and like philosophical, and like this is not helping anyone. It's not. It's purely just entertainment.
Well, yeah, I think it's a tricky one, because I think that. I mean, I do agree with you totally, but I think a lot of young people got suddenly very into left politics, and they were encouraged, like, you know, through memes and things, and
yeah,
podcasts.
yeah. No, I mean,
and then they didn't know what's not possible, not to like want to like, you know, ruining people's hopes. But you know, when they see people say, well, you know, you need to slow down, you can't just have a revolution, they call you a libtard or a liberal.
Yeah,
you know, and it's kind of frustrating, because of course when I was 18, when I was like 16, 18, I was saying like, let's have a revolution. You know, yeah, I mean, so it's a positive thing, because it's a positive aspect, because of course they're getting into left politics, but then it's kind of, it feels tough when you're getting like told off by an 18-year-old or 16-year-old that you're a fucking liberal, because you don't want to like put people's heads on spikes.
Yeah. I mean, those tankies are. Yeah, the people you're talking about. I mean, that's kind of, it's like memed at this point. Oh, you're 12 and you just got on the internet. Okay, you're automatically a communist, right? Or you're like extremely right-wing nationalist. You know, it's like that AI bot that went online for like 24 hours and then became like a right-wing racist white supremacist overnight, basically.
I didn't even see that, but that's funny. Yeah,
I think the name, it was like a Microsoft bot. I think the name was Tay or something like that. But yeah, but what I was saying before is like, yeah, I mean, there's people that are making memes that have nothing to do with the movement, and maybe, you know, maybe that's okay too. I mean, not everything has to fit into like the leftist kind of ontology. I'm not, you know, we can map out all of the different types of ontologies that could exist on the left, and I think sometimes it's good to just be like,
there's someone else doing that already. There's people who do that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, there's.
I know I was making a joke, because this is I didn't want to go there really, but Joshua Citarella, obviously, who does this whole thing of like mapping out. I
think he more maps out ideology, though, right?
Okay, yeah. Your distinction is you're saying we should map out
ontology.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, ideology is part of it, but like I'm talking about like distinct roles, right? As opposed, like he maybe crosses over with that. But
it's a different thing, maybe, yeah. But you mean, I mean, because I think, yeah, what you said earlier was important, like, about you're saying we need different people to do different things.
Yeah, exactly. The doing, the being, you know, as opposed to the believing. I think a lot of, you know, the anatomizing of ideology becomes pretty enclave. It becomes its own enclave when it's like.
Well, I mean, it's very interesting. You know how you get like these ridiculously specific, you know, terminologies that people apply to themselves. I mean, I can't really think off the top of my head, but like, you know, neo-monarchist, neo-anarcho-monarchists.
Yeah, Joshua is brilliant. Yeah.
I mean, you get all of this, but yeah, I mean, that says something about the kind of mentality that the online space kind of brings about, that it's very isolating.
Right, yeah, totally.
But you're talking about the roles, but you mean the roles within
I don't, but I'm just saying that if we focus too much on ideology, this is going back to the difference thing. We become too focused on if we focus too much on ideology, which is like the tendency, we become too focused on our differences. Our ideologies become the breaking point between solidarity and community. And we need to be focusing more on roles and like what we can do with each other. in policies. Like what can we do with each other to achieve these policies? Like I'm thinking like with the student workers, like I am like, I can't get involved with this in a direct way because I'm not a student worker, but I can call the president. I can, get other undergraduates involved, and I can make memes that get people interested, right? So I'm focusing on what I can do, right? And it's not about whether or not I'm a communist, like some of the organizers are like, I'm communist. It's like, I don't want to declare some kind of ideology. Like, I don't think that it's almost like, again, it almost becomes like aesthetic, at a certain point. And it undermines the community that we're attempting to imagine and build, so.
Yeah, well, that's for sure. Yeah, I mean, I agree with all of that. Yeah, I mean, that might really help people actually to be made to feel they can have a role and do stuff. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, go on. Yeah.
Oh, I was going to say which part resonates with you, I guess, just to make sure that.
Well, I mean,
make sure I'm making sense.
I mean that. I mean, a movement needs many roles. So we go back to saying, well, it's not that podcasters are bad necessarily. That's a role, but we need other roles to go alongside that.
Right.
And then now you're saying, we kind of could do a topology of roles, I suppose, online and offline roles. And if we had that, we might understand what roles exist, and we could, might understand also what people are doing, and then we could maybe match people up better.
Right.
Is that
yeah.
part of
Totally.
what you're saying? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think that would be very useful for a lot of people who are like left, particularly young, and actually, I think any age, and thinking, what can I do? I mean, a lot of people are a bit lost, I mean, I think the Bernie Sanders campaign was good at that. I think you had this kind of system of dispersed organization. I think maybe it was called.
Yeah,
this.
Exactly. Yeah.
And if I understand, then you had this like online system when you could like organize people and say, we need some canvassing in the street here, but we need some memes made about this as well. We need some telephone calls made, so people could kind of join different parts. Was that right?
Yeah. I mean, they had an app where you could basically in your own neighborhood and go door to door. So.
Yeah, I think that
and
was
then
effective.
You just ask. Yeah. I mean, so it was effective, but I mean, I think that it was effective, but actually I think that, we could have done more. It should have started earlier too. I think he started his campaign way too late. He kind of, and I think that, I mean, there's so many structural challenges he was against, so, but yeah, I think that overall, like from an ontological perspective or like what we can do, I think that is super helpful.
Yeah, I think for sure. Yeah, hang on, let me just think a second. I mean, that's such a good point, though. I think it's a question of how that would work. I mean, there's a certain glamorization around theory as well. I mean, I think theory is important, and this is part of the thing that people can theorize and feel to be doing something, but that also actually they are kind of doing something. And if somebody could, theorize really well the current moment we're living in, that would be a role as well. So I wouldn't write off theorizing and talking about theory. I think there's a little problem here. I think the problem here is partly that people kind of don't really appreciate their limits naturally. When we're young, we don't really know our limits. So there's a tendency to think that, maybe I don't need to go and get my hands dirty and join the local movement. Maybe I'm going to be the person who works out a new way of doing everything. And I think a lot of us are there in like our late teens and early 20s, and when we're naturally, perhaps at that age, introverted. So also like anything that can, we can do on our own, thinking in our own rooms rather than going out and dealing with people, we would rather do that. So I think, aside from whether giving people roles, is a better thing than people developing obscure kind of ideologies, we need some way of getting through to those people who are making the obscure ideologies, because it's kind of it's kind of a natural process, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I can see, I believe in the idea of, like, again, I think that theory has its own kind of place within the spectrum of relational, like if we're trying to think through a relational ontology of the left, I would say that theory has a place in helping leftists get out of their kind of focus on the same tactics, the same way of approaching things. Like theory really helped me get out of like the, thinking about the aesthetics of the left, and thinking about the roles of the left, and also just like, with the emphasis on localism always, I thought it was really helpful to start thinking more systemically. And, the future left is always focused on more systemic projects. Like we were like, what is the most systemic we could be in LA? So we were focusing on the city charter, which is the city constitution. And we're thinking, well, we could impact one policy, or we could impact the policy that underlies the whole city, right? So we attempted to have a research group, which, is not super theoretical, but it does have some theoretical elements, and to look at the ways in which we could impact this like systemic document, right? And I think approaches like that are really helpful, to to get out of the tendency, the Saul Alinsky strategy of start with a stop sign. He says, with any activist organization, the recommendation is to start with the stop sign, to organize a group and show that you can organize the city to get a stop sign put up in your local neighborhood. You start with a small group of people, and you always focus on one person at a time, and you always focus on building that relationship, and then you start with small achievable things. And that's kind of like the belief system right now of the left is, really small thinking. And climate change and multinational capitalism, the things that many leftists want to resist, cannot be resisted by assembling a stop sign in your neighborhood, right? So we still need to get through to the Alem Badus out there, the really theoretical people, which I think is, I don't think it's my duty personally to do that. I mean, I think that many of the most theoretical people end up coming around, or their tendencies to be pretty liberal is what I've found, as opposed to leftist or radical or anything like that.
Well, maybe, but I think there's also an aspect of people gravitating towards very complex things and the fetishization of complexity.
Yeah, the fetishization of complexity, yeah.
People gravitate towards Marxism because it's complicated, because you have this really long 3-part book, Marx's Capital, that people like to then, after reading, if they do read it, then they like to argue about it, or discuss it. So I think there are a number of people who are left aligned theoretically. A number of people who have theoretical minds do end up gravitating towards the left. I mean, there's also Theodore Adorno. I mean, he's very complex. But I think there's an issue where some people are very complex because they're trying to work something out for the very first time. And totally. so their intention isn't complexity in itself, but then they tend to attract people who just like complexity for its sake. I mean,
I definitely think a lot of theorists fall into the category of the professional managerial class, to the point where, in the sense that they are weaponizing leftist ideas for the aims of academic ends in itself, which, there's a place for that too. But I think that what you're saying is that the tendency is actually for never to reach anyone and to stay in its enclave. And I think that there's a lot of truth to that. So I totally agree with you. I think Adorno is a little bit of a PMC himself.
Well, yeah, I mean, Adorno was he was the son of Sardinian, so Italian aristocrat. That's his mum, and then his dad owned vineyards. He was German. So I mean, they were upper bourgeois. They were part of the capitalist class for sure, like most of the Frankfurt School.
But his feeling though was that the anti-intellectualism in the U.S. was tied to anti-Semitic urges, though, which there's probably some truth to that as well.
Yeah, I mean, particularly, I think he would have been talking anti-Semitism because he was a German Jew, and he fled Germany during World War II. Yeah,
but he talked about he talked about that when he entered the United States, though, that he felt like the anti-intellectualism in the United States was, and part of his experience in Germany influenced that. But I do think that there's a lot of anti-intellectualism in America for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think one question I would have is, what does one do with the people who really just want to go over and over academic texts and don't really want to merge into the activist realm and don't really want to offer a solution, or probably won't? And of course, Adorno doesn't really offer solutions, and he sort of says there aren't any, without going into Adorno deeply here. But certainly we have like other podcasts on the acid left where I've talked about Adorno in depth. I just won't now because we don't really have the time. But what does one do? I mean, perhaps they don't really want to be involved, and then you can maybe not look there. I mean, do you ever think that there's people who are going to get involved and there's people who aren't, and let's just focus on those ones who are?
Yeah, no, I mean, I definitely think that the latter is the case. I mean, so I think that when it comes to critique, I mean, my experience with critique my own experience has been that when I'm personally, and I can't speak for everyone, when I'm personally focusing on mostly that it can feel like there isn't much to do. And so I can definitely see where people are led to that conclusion. I think the kind of like the natural tendency for biopolitics in the current day, which is probably more relevant, is that biopolitics leads us to thinking that there's no way to become free unless we put our body on the line. And in some cases that means like suicide, right? And some people believe that. I've heard professors say that. And so again, this goes back to the conversation about nihilism, which you and I have talked about before, I believe. But I think that Nietzsche's nihilism gets a bad rap and is kind of misrepresented, because often people are thinking about passive nihilism and the idea that because God is dead, there's no meaning, and in our case, everything is bleak, that we should just succumb to the realism of the world. But I think because we can live in this postmodern age and create our own meaning, that we should create meaning that is resistant to biopolitical forces that want us to sacrifice our bodies. And if we are to sacrifice our bodies for political aims, it's if you want to, it's something that has caused the rise of social movements in some cases, like in Egypt. But I think that basically we have to focus on the active form, which is, we create our own meaning, and we're going to resist the social constructions that are limiting our freedoms. So that's just where I am, I think that I allow myself to be in between theory and activism, and meaning and activism, and being in between helps me not get so stuck, and a single identity. I don't know. I think that's really liberating for me personally. So I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but yeah.
Well, I think to go towards wrapping up now, I think it's been a really interesting discussion, and I think that we didn't talk specifically about solidarity as a term. I mentioned that we would be talking about that, but I think we've been talking around that. And I think what's really been kind of important in that respect is the identification of the need to identify roles and to ascribe roles. And I think once you have a role within a group, you do feel maybe somehow more worthy, or something becomes more worthwhile. And I think that's much more fulfilling than deliberately putting out nihilist messages, which are just a dead end. But I mean, that's kind of just me, and obviously you as well, and a number of other people in the world, thankfully, that do want to create some meaning. And not because I don't think we're kind of wishy-washy. I think we know that there maybe isn't a meaning, but why not kind of rise to that challenge? Of course, I understand that there's some people who can't bring themselves out of a depressive state. That's another issue. That's another issue. But I don't take nihilism for its own sake to really be a position. I think it's a non-position. So I'm glad that there's people like you who are like putting out the good vibes and messages and keeping things going and building movements. And I think that I will start to think more now about how does one build a kind of a map of roles that people can do, online and offline. Particularly offline, because I'm worried about people not doing stuff offline enough. But I think, as podcasters, we can direct them offline as well. Hopefully when they're not actually listening to us, but we can direct them offline. Afterwards they can go and do something useful. But anyway, I mean, that's a really great thought, and thank you for being with us. If you have any last minute thing to add, actually, can you just tell us what you're doing in terms of organization next, or anything else you want to tell us about what's coming up?
So if you haven't seen our documentary on the corruption of the LA police union, go to YouTube and look up Who Do You Protect? That was produced by the Future Left, but also by Sean and Laura from the Future Left, who are documentary makers. We are about to release our new series of books we're going to be doing for our reading group. One of the books I'm most excited about is Savage Ecology from Jarrett's Grove. And then if you want to get involved with us, just hit us up on Instagram, or you can email us at info@thefutureleft, or just hit me up on Instagram at Matthew Donovan. So I think that's the big those are the big announcements from us. So thanks for having me.
We'll have all those links below for the listener. Thank you. And yeah, of course, no worries. Great to have you here, and hope we get to speak soon, and I'll be looking forward to seeing what you're doing.
If you have been enjoying our content, please consider registering your desire with the algorithm by liking and subscribing. This really does help us grow and reach a wider community. If you would like to support our work of documenting and nurturing the rise of post-capitalist desires, become a patron. This allows us to continue research-based memes, podcasts, and videos, as well as up our production value. Patrons receive early views of videos, exclusive content, and more, including physical art and the ability to directly influence our research topics. The building of a better world happens on many fronts. Turn on, tune in, and shape a future collective reality.